Hello everyone. Today we are going to take a look at one of the most overlooked things when it comes to selecting a mutual fund. Okay, without building any suspense, I'm talking about overlap ratio. So what it is? So before buying a mutual fund, you do your research and then you look at some criteria or not, like expense ratio, past performance, turnover ratio, etc, etc, etc. If you are confused how to pick a mutual fund, check out my last video. You can watch that video by clicking here. But often I see people not taking into account overlap ratio. So what that is? So basically overlap ratio comes into picture when you are trying to pick more than one mutual fund, right? So for example, suppose you're considering two large cap funds because you don't want to have too much risk by investing in small cap. So suppose you are considering investing in two large cap funds. So what you do is basically you go ahead, and in the previous video I showed, maybe you go ahead a website called Value Research Online or Money Control or wherever, right? And then you compare all these things: turnover, expense ratio, past performance, and fund manager, etc, etc. And then you pick the best two mutual funds and you are like, oh, okay, that is done, I'm set for the future, awesome. But there's a big problem there. You forgot about overlap ratio. What that means is the amount of stocks which are common across both the funds, right? So for example, both the funds invest in 50-50 stocks each, and suppose for an example, right, each of that fund has like 30 stocks in common, right? So that gives us overlap ratio of 60%, right, which is not at all good. Why? Because you're not diversifying, right? The main idea you're picking two mutual funds is like, okay, returns is one thing, but you're like, okay, diversification is definitely one piece to it that you are considering, right? But if the overlap ratio is 60%, which is out of 50 stocks, 30 of them are common across both these mutual funds, then suppose in a rough market those 30 stocks take a nosedive and go down, then both the mutual funds will go down, right? Because majority of the stocks are common between both of them. So this is one very important thing to consider when picking up a mutual fund. No matter you are considering small cap funds, mid cap funds, or large cap funds, or multi cap funds, always, if you are picking up more than one fund, and so go ahead and compare the overlap ratio of the second fund that you are choosing, right? And see that what's the overlap ratio between both of them. Otherwise you are better off increasing the amount in the first one if the overlap ratio is like 60-70%, right? So for me personally, I try to keep the overlap ratio between my funds less than 30%, right? Because that's a healthy number, right? Because there are good companies and most of the funds want to pick those good companies and invest in them. So it will be highly unlikely that if you are considering mutual funds of the same category like large cap, you will find a fund, two funds which will have zero overlap ratio. It will be hardly the case. If you are considering something like Nifty 50 index fund and Nifty next 50 index fund, then yes, the overlap ratio will be zero, because the 50 companies in the Nifty 50 are totally different from the 50 companies in the Nifty next 50, right? So that's how that's an exception. So let me just show everything that I explained with an example. Let's dive right into it. So here you are seeing I've opened a website called Value Research Online, and then I have already selected the equity large cap as a category. And just like last time or in the previous video, let me just sort it by rating. And suppose you choose maybe ICICI Prudential and one of my favorite funds, which is like UTI Nifty Index Fund, because I just like it because it has the least expense ratio that I could find till date. And let's compare both of those funds, right? Because you see that, okay, ICICI Prudential blue chip, it's 5 ratings, 37% return, and it's a good fund, right? So let me go to a website called thefundu.com, and you can see that it's already selected some of the things, but let me compare UTI Nifty Index Fund and then the ICICI blue chip. Okay, let's hit go. Now you can see that the portfolio overlap is 57%, right? And here you can see like 34 stocks are common between both of them. So that's a huge percentage, right? Because more than 50% of the stocks are common across both these funds, right? So if you see ICICI Bank, both of them invest in that particular company. Reliance Industries, both of them invest. HDFC, Infosys, everything, right? So you can dive further into it, like, yeah, what are the other companies and how much percentage they invest, right? But the whole idea is just to look at the overlap ratio, right? So, and if I would be you, I will not invest in one of these funds, right? Because there's no point, right? The point is to just diversify so that I can get better returns over time. And I'll just simply go ahead and then maybe invest in UTI Nifty Index Fund because the expense ratio is 0.2 compared to ICICI Prudential Blue Chip, which I think is close to 0.8 or something, right? I am a big proponent of lower expense ratios, so I'll do that. But you can look at the past performance and compare the returns, and then maybe select ICICI Prudential. But over the long term, for me, it is like 25-30 years. Very few stocks overperform the index fund, right? So most of them underperform the index. Yeah, this is just one example. Now let me maybe pick another category. Let's compare equity small cap, right? So I'll just search for EQ-SC for small cap, and let me pick this. Let me again sort by rating, and let's compare. Maybe you select the first two funds because they are good, and just for an example, Nippon India small cap, and then let's pick the second one as Tata small cap. Okay, let's compare these two now. So if you are planning to invest in a small cap fund and you settle upon these two funds, now these two funds have an overlap ratio of just 8%, right, which is great. So I will go ahead and then just invest in them because over the past couple of years the return is good. Expense ratio for Nippon is higher. I might not consider it, but Tata I might. But I'll not dive into the criteria for picking up a mutual fund. For that you can watch my previous video, and I'm just comparing two funds and their overlap ratio. So the overlap ratio is very less, and if I have to diversify between multiple funds in small cap category, I'll just go ahead and then invest in these particular funds because the overlap ratio is very, very, very low. So that's what I wanted to share in this particular video, because based on my conversation with multiple people, my friends, my colleagues, and other people, I found out that no one was even considering overlap ratio when picking up multiple mutual funds, right? So that's why I thought it would be a good idea to make a video around it. And I've also covered this point in my book, Mutual Funds the Right Way, for which you can find the link in the description below, where I talk about all these things like overlap ratio, expense ratio, past performance, fund managers, history, etc., and the other things which you should definitely consider when picking up the mutual fund. So hope you like this video, and stay tuned for other insightful videos related to personal finance, investing, etc. Until then, you get to live, make the most out of it.